Let's see. Okay, now according to this, the meeting is being recorded. So that's good. Welcome to session number 19 of Genesis in Depth. I'm Dr. John McMath. I'm joined here by my friends in Italy and in the Philippines. We've been studying through the various topics of Bible and theology ever since COVID. So going on, what, 5 years now, 4 years now? We've gone through a lot of video in that time. And if you're joining us on YouTube or Facebook, welcome. It's good to have you along. Okay, we're in chapter 18 of the book of Genesis. And this continues the story of Abraham as he attempts this often flawed walk with God. God has told him, follow me, do what I tell you to do. I'm going to show you a place. I'm going to make you a great people. You're going to be a blessing. Everyone who blesses you, I'll bless. Those who curse you, I'll curse. And through you, all the nations of the world will be blessed. So the essential issue for Abraham and for Sarah uh, is to walk with God, whatever that ends up meaning, and to be a blessing. And to be a blessing involves being a good guy. That's part of it, and looking for ways to to be helpful in the community that you're a part of. So we see an example here of Abraham doing that whole walk with God, be a blessing thing as he's going along. And in this chapter, and I don't know why I'm coughing actually. I haven't coughed all morning. Now suddenly I start talking and I'm coughing. Okay. Uh, as we get started on this, we're going to see Abraham spotting what appears to be three men on the horizon, and his response to them is a detailed narrative. This is fun because we learn something about the Bedouin approach or the nomadic approach, the wilderness approach to hospitality, and it's really quite the thing. Now the Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre. First I'm going to put a put an underlined on that. Who appeared? Well, it appeared to be three men, but the Bible says the Lord appeared to him. Uh, so typically, we take one of these three to be the angel of the Lord. And we talked about the angel of the Lord before. This is a mysterious character. He represents God with all of the authority and power of God and is obeyed in the sequences that we've seen, just as God personally would be obeyed. Some have uh, argued that this has to be the pre-incarnate Christ. Most modern theologians are not willing to go there, as I've mentioned before. Uh, to say that degrades the meaning of the incarnation itself, which we celebrate at Easter. And it's a big deal that God became a man. And if that happened routinely all through the Old Testament, then it takes something away from that. So we leave the angel of the Lord as a kind of a mysterious character, but certainly full of the authority of God. When when the Bible says the Lord appeared to Abraham, that's just what it means. And he beheld these three men as he was sitting at the tent door in the heat of the day. He lifted up his eyes, verse 2, and looked, and behold, three men were standing opposite him. And when he saw them, by opposite, the Bible means, the Hebrew here means that they were at a distance where they were just barely visible, where they the encampment, Abraham's uh, compound, was just on the horizon, and the three men were also just on the horizon. This is this is the tradition in the desert world as you're traveling along with whatever you have, whether it's camels or you're using four-wheel drive specialized vehicles to get out there. And you stop at the edge of visibility at a point where you can see that there's a camp there, uh, but you can't see any details. And that's important. You respect the privacy of the people that you're visiting. Someone from the camp, usually one of the men, will come out when I've been in on these things. It's usually been prearranged, and the one coming out will be somebody with a pickup truck. And they'll come out and meet and greet and lead everybody back into the camp. Abraham walked out and greeted these men. He saw them and he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth, which again is a this is an elaborate part of the hospitality uh, issue that he said, "My Lord," and this is the lowercase Lord. This is the correct greeting for anyone in obvious authority or for a guest. So the Hebrew is Adonai. And yes, I know that that's the same as what Jewish people say when they read the actual name of the Lord Yahweh. The Hebrew here is not Yahweh. The Hebrew here is Adonai, my Lord. And he said, "My Lord, if now I have found favor in your sight, please do not pass your servant by." Now, of course, they had no intention of passing by. "Please let a little water be brought and wash your feet and rest yourselves here under the tree, and I will bring a piece of bread that you may refresh yourselves. After that, you may go on, since you have visited your servant." And they said, "So do as you have said." Okay, so this is the beginning of a bit of Bedouin hospitality. Excuse me just a second. And it's actually fairly elaborate. What Abraham is about to do is actually a really big deal. Yes, but it's routine in the wilderness. When you're traveling in the wilderness amongst the nomadic tribes of the Negev, the Sinai, the edges of the Great Arabian Desert, uh, if you come upon a Bedouin camp and you present yourself as a friend, the peace be upon you. You come showing no weapons, and you say salam alaikum. And the response from the guest is going to be, "And peace be upon you as well, wa salam alaikum." And the stranger who appears out of nowhere uh, probably has nowhere else to go. Uh, and hospitality is essential for his survival. So strangers who come in peace have to be offered food and a place to rest for 3 days. And they're to be given the best food that's available in the house, the best place to sleep. The rest of the family is expected to put themselves out and be at the service of these people. If there are perils, for example, if the stranger is running from enemies, and he comes in peace and receives peace from the homeowner. That homeowner, the chief of the compound, is obligated to protect him with his life for as long as it takes. This is actually a fairly solemn and uh, fairly significant obligation. So uh, Abraham is doing well. He's doing the walk with God, be a blessing lifestyle. Here he is, and people come. He's doing the right thing. He doesn't yet know exactly who these people are, but he's going to be good. So Abram turned into the tent to Sarah and said, uh, I've always liked this. Quickly prepare 3 measures of fine flour, knead it, and make bread cakes. Okay, I don't know if any of you ladies have ever made bread, but bread almost never gets made quickly. It's something that takes a little while. Now, what Sarah will probably be making is what we today call pita in the Middle East and in the Mediterranean world in general. Flatbread, round, soft, and usually not particularly leavened. Baked over a hot stone is the best, but it's but just a flat, soft bread. Sarah would have mixed up some flour and whatever else goes into those things and made it into flat, round things and put it on a hot rock to bake. It would have taken a little while, but probably this was not as elaborate as letting the dough rise for half a day. It'll be a quick bread. Uh, but Abraham is going to go out and in verse 7, he ran to the herd, took a tender and choice calf, okay, an entire calf, and gave it to a servant, uh, and he hurried to prepare it. So what do you do? Well, you've got to slaughter the calf and then butcher the calf and hang the meat because you can't eat the meat with the blood in it. And so you hang the meat, you butcher it into chunks and then cook. This is again a fairly extensive thing that's going on. And all of this fits into the desert hospitality motif. And the idea of taking care of visitors who come to you. This was simply the right thing to do. Abraham was happy to do that. Sarah fit in wherever she could. The servants all knew their roles. Uh, we get an insight here that continues to be true today. And as I've said, I've had opportunities a couple of times to enjoy the hospitality of Bedouin people, and it really is kind of fun. The food takes a little getting used to. There's sometimes you'll get pita and what they call a mixed grill, whatever meat is available along with whatever vegetables are available, stirred in a big brass pan with some olive oil. Yeah, you just imagine, and then you use your pita bread and perhaps some hummus, and put it all together, make a kind of sandwich out of it. Uh, and that's probably very close to what we're looking at here. So, uh, all that prelude gives us some idea of what is going on in the world at that time, and then we get the question, the first substantive bit of conversation from these men, and they said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" And he said, "Well, she's right there in the tent." And he said, "I will surely return to you at this time. I will surely return." This is the Lord speaking. um, through his angel. Um, we don't know exactly, but Abraham realized he was talking to somebody with some authority here. I will return surely to you this time next year, and behold, Sarah, your wife, will have a son. Um, the the Hebrew here is fun to read. It's fun to translate. We translate it, surely I will return. And the Hebrew says, returningly, I will return. Surely returning, I will return. It's a doubling of the verb in order to emphasize that this is a solemn promise. I will be back this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will bear a son and will have borne the son by the time I come back. So that's quite a promise. Uh, and it comes into the center of the whole Abrahamic storyline. The whole thing begins with the message that Sarai, his wife, is barren. She could have no children. And Abraham talking about Eliezer, his servant, the stupidity with Hagar and Ishmael. All of this is a part of the same story as Abraham struggles to walk with God, to do the right thing, to be the kind of man that he ought to be in the world. He doesn't always succeed. This is what he's trying to do. So it's all good. Uh, so where's your wife? And he said, I will surely return at this time next year, and behold, Sarah will have a son. And Sarah was listening at the tent door, which was behind him. Now, Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age, and Sarah was past childbearing, literally, and it had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. And we all know what that means. Uh, Sarah was past the age where she had any expectation of bearing children, and Abraham also was getting to the age where it becomes more difficult to hope for children. And between the two of them, this was not likely. And uh, so Abraham and Sarah were advanced. So 12, Sarah laughed to herself. She kind of giggled under her breath, uh, not a loud thing. And she said, after I become old, shall I have this pleasure, my Lord being old also? Okay, the question here is, um, we've never had children. We've tried forever, and this has never worked for us. And at this point, we're well past that. We're 100 years old. This isn't going to happen now. And so we get that set up, and the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh?" Why did Sarah laugh? That's a great question. Saying, "Shall I indeed bear a child when I am old?" Okay, so why did Sarah laugh? Well, because it's a ridiculous proposition. Now, I think both Abraham and Sarah trusted God. They believed that God was, in fact, the God of the universe and the creator and all of that. Uh, but they had perhaps never really seriously taken to heart the promise that Sarah herself will bear a son to you, Abraham. Uh, this is finally going to work. But uh, it's going to require a miracle. Let's look at verse 14. And the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Shall I have a child? Verse 14, is anything too difficult for the Lord? Uh, let's see, that's verse 14 to, yeah, the Hebrew for difficult there is actually usually translated wonderful. Uh, the term wonderful usually refers to the miraculous. So the question is, um, how big a miracle do you suppose is too big for God? Is it possible for me to produce new life in the form of a child for you from two people who are too old for that sort of thing? Am I not the God who created you, who made Sarah's womb, who understands how birth happens and made the system? Am I not the one who did all of this? Do you think that I cannot do a miracle with this that I have created? And that essentially is it. Is anything too difficult for the Lord? God can do this. Now, the really important thing here is, yes, of course, it's difficult, and of course, it will take a miracle. We're going to have to do the work of bringing life from the dead. And that is the central thesis of the Abraham narrative, life from the dead. What's it going to require for the Messiah to bring life to the world, to be a blessing to the world? It's going to require life from the dead. And we're going to begin with Abraham. Actually, we began with the creation. Adam and Eve were made from the dirt. God brought life, his own life, into a place where there was only death. And that's God's trademark, is that life. And so here in the Abraham narrative, uh, we see this promise of a new life, a child to be next in line in the messianic line, to be the key character looking forward to the messianic line. It's a very, very, very big deal. Uh, and God waited for this until both Abraham and Sarah were too old, when it would literally require a miracle for them to have a child. So it is the miracle of life from the dead. And this prefigures and gives us a clue to the emphasis on the salvation itself. Salvation is not a process of joining a club or deciding to uh, give up some favorite sins, or to have a new way of having a haircut and dressing up for church and all of that. That's not about it. The essence of Christianity is the new birth. In the New Testament, where Jesus talks about being born again, when we talk about the new birth, the second birth, this is a very essential, key New Testament concept built on the truth that all life comes from God. All life is sacred. It comes from God. And if there is going to be life where there was death, if there's going to be a resurrection, it will be God's work, because only God gives life. We cannot create life in a test tube. Life is a gift of God. In the New Testament, the new birth itself is the miracle of God's life made present in the spiritually dead sinner. The Spirit of God reaches down and plants life where there was only death. He throws a switch from death to life. That requires, in every single case, a direct interactive miracle from God. So, yeah, people ask me, well, do you believe in miracles? Yes. Every time we lead someone to Christ, we're experiencing a miracle, the miracle of resurrection, of life from the dead, because God is the life giver. That's essential. That's essential. Uh, and when this happens in today's world, when God gives new life to a spiritually dead sinner, this makes him a son of God. It gives him a place beside God Himself, beside Christ, alongside the princes of the people. Um, Salvation is such an important and essential theme of the Bible that what we're seeing here is the the groundwork, this part of the foundation for the concept. You have to believe in the miracle of the new birth, which is the key miracle of both Old Testament and New Testament doctrines of salvation. So in verse 15, Sarah is a little scared that she has been heard. And Sarah denied it, however, saying, I didn't laugh. If I did laugh, I didn't mean to, and I'll never do it again. I didn't laugh, for she was afraid, and he, the Lord, said, Oh no, but you did laugh. uh, they'll be back. We're going to see them again in a couple of chapters, and it gets to be more fun. This is a great story. Okay, so verse 16. Then the men rose up from there and looked down toward Sodom. Before that, I'm going to give you just a little. Sarah says, "I didn't laugh." Oh yes, you laughed. Later on, we're going to hear that the child's name will be Isaac. Okay, and the name Isaac in Hebrew is Yiskach, and that's the imperfect. Well, it doesn't matter what's the imperfect of it. It's a form of the verb to laugh. Okay, so we would translate it, he laughs, or he laughs all the time. Uh, and when Isaac is born, God will be there. The angels will be there, and his name will be a constant reminder that in all of this, God has the last laugh. And he's going to enjoy himself. God will sit in his heaven, looking down on an old nomad's camp, with this little toddler scampering around, terrifying the goats. And, uh, yeah, and Abraham and Sarah chasing him around and having the time of their lives, having the thrill of a family at last. And God will laugh, and Isaac will laugh, and Abraham and Sarah finally will get a good laugh. Isaac, good name for him. They called him He Laughs because that just seemed like a good name. It seemed like the right name to give him. Let's go on. And so we're going to go on from there to some bargaining. Verse 16. This picture was taken in Jerusalem, part of the old city of Jerusalem that we call the Souk. S-U-K is one way of spelling it. Sometimes we put an O in there, S-O-U-K. Well, it's the Souk. And one of the first things that people notice, well, not so much anymore. It used to be when I first began going to Jerusalem, you would go into the souk and there were no prices on anything. If you wanted a kilo of tomatoes, you picked out your tomatoes, you put them in the weight, and then you began the process of bargaining. Yeah, there was never a price, and the price was set through the process of bargaining. And here you see a shopkeeper, the man in all white, and a uh, man dressed up in a Bedouin headscarf. His wife is there, and they've been shopping. This is a big day. They've come in from the countryside, and they're shopping in Jerusalem. And so they're going to begin bargaining over whatever it is he's decided he would probably like. It's great fun. When you I always tell my students when they come with me into Jerusalem, take some money with you into the souk and buy some things just for the entertainment value. Don't expect to get a great deal. You probably won't. These merchants do this for a living, and they always come out on the profit side. They always do well. So go in and have some fun. Yeah, they're going to set a price. I remember once going into a shop in the souk where there were antiquities, pottery and that sort of thing. And I found a small piece of imitation chocolate on white pottery, just a little juglet, and I thought it looked like a pretty good thing. And I took it to the little boy who was running the shop while his grandpa was gone, and he didn't speak English, but he knew that here was a live one. So we go. He runs down to one of the other shops, and Grandpa comes back. He ran three or four shops in the area. And Grandpa comes back, and Grandpa looks at me and says, thank you so much for coming into my humble shop. How may I be of assistance to you this day? And I was holding this little pot, and I said, "Well, I'm interested in this little pot." He says, you have excellent taste, my friend. That is, in fact, a genuine pottery from Hebron. It comes with a certificate of authenticity." And I told him, yes, it is lovely. It's a lovely example of the imitation chocolate on white. He was a little upset that I called it imitation chocolate on white, but that is, in fact, the technical name for it. And he looked at him and says, "Because you are my first customer today." Everybody is always the first customer. Because you're my first customer today, for you, I make a special deal. For you, only $200 US. And that was far more than I could ever hope to spend. That was way too much. So I set it back on the shelf, and I told him that's far too much. I can't possibly. And I was trying to walk out of the store, and he kept bringing the price down. Did I say 200? What I really meant for you, because you're my friend, $100 US. And then we have a deal. And he put the pot back in my hand. And I took the pot and put it back on the shelf, and I walked out. He said, "Did I say 100? What I meant was $50 US. You can walk away with this fine piece." And I finally managed to get out of the shop. But that's how bargaining goes. You go back and forth over what's the most you'll do, what's the least, and you finally arrive at a price that makes everybody happy. The fact that he was willing to sell this thing for less than $50, which is almost 40 years ago, um, meant that it was probably a fake. But that was all right. I've got several fakes on my shelf. But I didn't buy that one. That was much too expensive for a fake. So the bargaining is great fun. It was great fun, and we see Abraham here bargaining with the angels. So the men rose up from there and looked down toward Sodom, and Abraham was walking with them to send them off. So this is verse 16. So they're up and deciding to go, and the Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Since Abraham will surely become a great and mighty nation." Uh, Oh, okay. And in him all the nations of the earth will be blessed. So God is talking to his angels, and they're making up their minds exactly what to tell Abraham. For have I, for I have chosen him, so that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring upon Abraham what he has spoken about him. Okay, the point of Abraham and his followers is to live righteously and to do justice, and in that way to be a blessing to the world. The Jewish people to this day consider their primary point in life, their covenant obligation, uh, to live righteously and to do justice. And the Hebrew principles of righteousness and justice in their technical terms form the foundation of Western law. Eastern law is different, Muslim law is different, but in the Judeo Christian world, the Jewish concepts of righteousness before God and a system of justice that holds all men accountable to the principles of God is a gift to us through the through the Jewish people, through their Old Testament, through their invention uh, of the mechanisms for defining ethics and for setting about the construction of law based on eternal principles. So this is actually a really good thing that the Jewish people have done with their history, and it's a big part of the reason that Christians really ought to appreciate our Jewish friends. They have rejected the Messiah, and so they are incomplete. Yet what they have done is truly wonderful. So, that's what God has to say. Okay, I've chosen him so that he may command his children, uh, and so that the Lord may bring to Abraham everything he's spoken about him. Verse 20 is the key. This is where we see the point of the exercise. And the Lord said, "The outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is indeed great, and their sin is exceedingly grave." Okay, well, we have indications from the story of Lot thus far that Sodom and Gomorrah is not a nice place. This is a place where uh, unrighteousness in the extreme is going on. And we're going to look at that in chapter 19. Um, there's quite a lot going on there, and it's rather a sordid chapter. The outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great. Their sin is grave. Well, I will go down now and see if they've done entirely according to its outcry, which has come to me. If not, I will know. Now, commentators can't quite agree what the term outcry is a reference to. Is it that there are believers in Sodom who are crying out to the Lord in prayer? That's possible. That's often what that means. But who would that be? As far as we know, the only believers in Sodom were Lot and his family. Lot had a wife and they had two daughters. And by this time, there are a couple of young men from Sodom who were pledged in marriage to the daughters. And so they would be included as a part of the family. So it would be expected that there would be some outcry. As far as we know, uh, those were the only believers. In the New Testament, I believe it's the book of Hebrews, but I could be wrong. It might be Jude or one of the Peters. We're told about righteous Lot, whose righteous soul was tormented day and night. Okay, if he was all that tormented, he should have done something about it. Nevertheless, it could be simply Lot's prayers. So if Lot was praying for these people and telling God how awful this was, he should have been doing what he could to convince the people of Sodom to uh, change their wicked ways and walk with God. That was the right thing to do, and it didn't quite happen that way. Um, so the outcome of Sodom is great. Their sin is grave, and we're going down to investigate. So this is what's happening. Uh, and the men turned away from there and went towards Sodom while Abraham was still standing before the Lord. Say uh, two of the men, Abraham is still talking to the Lord, this angel of the Lord character, and the two men have turned away from there and they're walking toward Sodom. And Abraham came near and said, "Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" Okay, this basic basic beginning point. He begins bargaining with God. Suppose, Abraham says, there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you indeed sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of 50 righteous who are in it? Okay, so that sounds good. 50 people is a lot of people. And, you don't want all that collateral damage, let's say. So we got to be careful. And so the Lord said, "If I find 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare the whole place on their account." And Abraham replied, "Now behold, if I've ventured to speak to the Lord, although I'm but dust and ashes, suppose the 50 are lacking 5. Will you destroy the whole city because of 5?" And the Lord said, "I will not destroy it if I find 45 there." And he spoke to him yet again and said, "Suppose 40 are found." And he said, "I will not do it on account of the 40. Oh, may the Lord not be angry. I shall speak. Suppose there are 30. And he said, I will not do it if I find 30. He said, "Now, behold, I've ventured to speak to the Lord. Suppose there's only 20. I will not destroy it on account of the 20. And then he said, "Oh, may the Lord not be angry with me. I shall speak only this once. Suppose 10 are found." He said, "I will not destroy it on account of the 10. And that's as far as they go. The answer is essentially don't push your luck. Uh, I've gone as far as I'm going to go. I'll spare it for 10. And at that, the Lord departed. And the impression we get from moving on into chapter 19 is that the Lord departed, went back to heaven, wherever he goes, and the two angels are going to continue. And as we move on into chapter 19, we're going to see this interaction of the two angels with Lot in the city of Sodom. And this is the beginning of a process that's going to result in the destruction of the cities of the plain. And I'm afraid I don't have time to get through everything, but we can begin at the beginning. So we're going to look at the first little bit here. I'll show you what's going on. And the two angels came to Sodom in the evening. Okay, that's not unusual. Visitors to a city would normally arrive there at the end of a day of traveling. They've been out, they've been traveling. Maybe they've been traveling for days and days. But whatever, when they've come to a city, they require the hospitality of the city. In the ancient world, a city was normally a place with some kind of a wall. Uh, at the time of Abraham, the wall would not have been a big thing, but there would have been a gate, and inside the city gate, there would be what in Italy we call piazza, a square, which may or may not be square. There would be a variety of shapes, but that would be the central business district of the city. On one side of the piazza, uh, uh, people who were travelers would find a place to stable their donkeys and camels, whatever they came with, and they'd find a place to sleep. Usually there'd be hay to bed down on, and not it was not the Ritz. This isn't five-star hotels, but it would be a comfortable place to rest for the night. Food would be available nearby. The In a city, you wouldn't get the same obligation of hospitality as in a Bedouin encampment outside, and yet there was an obligation for the city to provide safety, protection, a comfortable enough place for travelers to rest for a while. Because at the time, and all through the Old Testament world until well into the Middle Ages, there was no such thing as an inn. There was no such thing as a hotel or a motel. They didn't exist. And this would be the normal place. Now, also in the piazza, in the square of the city, there would be the businesses of the city. The most important businessmen of the city would have a place under cover in the gate. The gate would be this covered area, usually with several chambers. There would be a big wooden structure that would act as an outer barrier. Guards could be in the area. During the early Bronze Age, when we have the Abraham stories, the world was a fairly safe place. So there may not have been armed guards, but it was a fairly secure area for the time. Only the most prosperous and powerful residents of the city would have a place in the gate. Okay. So as the angels came down, they found Lot sitting in the gate. Now, if you're standing in the gate in order to do business with some of the businessmen, that's one thing. But to be sitting in the gate meant that Lot had a permanent presence in the gate area. He was one of the very privileged players in Sodom. He was on an inside track to great riches because of his agreement and his cooperation with the other leading characters of Sodom. He was absolutely an insider in Sodom, an outsider who doesn't belong there would never have a place in the gate. Merchants could sell, but for Lot to have a place there meant that he may have been a banker. We're not told what he did. He may have been a money changer. That was a very common business to exist in the gate. Still today, actually, if you go to Jerusalem, you'll find a money changer just inside the Damascus gate. Great fun, because people come from all over the place. And if you're going to buy and sell here in Sodom, you need some of the local money. And that's a very nice convenience, and it's a nice profit. We don't know what uh, Lot did there, but he was definitely what what modern businessmen would call a player. That is, he has a stake in this game. He's making a profit from the things that are happening in Sodom. Lot knew full well what was happening in Sodom, and it may have bothered his righteous soul, but not nearly enough to walk away from it. Okay, so in verses 2 and 3, we see Lot welcoming the angels. And we see at the end of verse 1, the two angels came. Lot was sitting in the gate. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them, bowed down with his face to the ground. Here goes this hospitality thing. Okay, Lot is going to invite them into his home. He said, "Now behold, my lords, please turn aside into your servant's house, spend the night, wash your feet, then you may rise early and get out of here." And they said, however, "Oh no, we shall spend the night in the square." Now, again, Lot knew full well what went on in the square after dark. He knew that the various establishments surrounding the square sold more than clothing and food. This was the center of the social activities of the city. Lot knew what was coming. The sins of Sodom are not extensively cataloged for us, but we know that this was really, really bad. Uh, Lot knew that if these men stayed in the square, that they would be attacked during the night by the men of Sodom. That they would be used to satisfy the perversions of the men of Sodom. Lot knew what would happen, and so he urged them strongly. As we see this developing, he urged them strongly, so they turned aside to him and entered his house. And he prepared a feast for them and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. So we've got the same sort of hospitality going on as Abraham showed. Lot would have had the same traditions. The men of the city of Sodom, on the other hand, were not given to that kind of hospitality, and that's where the story goes. And the question is, instead of Bedouin hospitality, what do the men of Sodom have in mind? And the Bible makes that, frankly, quite clear. And before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, surrounded the house, both young and old, all the people from every quarter. So a mob of the men of Sodom. And they called to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may have relations with them." They were talking about sexual relations, of course. What they intended to do has given the world a new bit of terminology. The term sodomy is the activity of homosexual men with one another. This is not a pretty thing to talk about, and yet that's what we have going on in Sodom. Homosexuality was one part of the larger Canaanite, Amorite, Gentile sin catalog. We find that the religions of the ancient world, the fertility religions, primarily focused on heterosexual prostitution, men and women. Uh, there were some fringe, really bad Canaanite Gentile practices that were characteristic of the worship of the moon. Haran, where Abraham's father Terah stopped the family, Very likely Jericho, probably Hatzor, and Ai later on when we see the fall of the land. Those cities also seem to have followed this pattern of including the homosexual practices. Today we call this the LGBTQ plus lifestyle. This is described in the biblical narrative as among the worst sin that men can possibly commit. Now, I'm of the opinion that all sin is bad sin, and we really we ought to do what we can to mitigate our own sin and to encourage other people to stop pursuing a life of sin. I'm all for that. And I would not say that there's a deeper part of hell or for active homosexuals than for others. I, I'm not making that case, but I am making the case that the sinners in this category appear to receive from God a louder and more enthusiastic condemnation. And I'm not totally sure why, except that the whole homosexual lifestyle, the perversion lifestyle, uh, seeks to destroy the nuclear family, seeks to destroy a normal civilization built on the foundation of a normal mom and dad and little kids family. Christianity, Judaism before it, is built on the normal family. Adam and Eve were a man and a woman who began to have children. They were commanded to be fruitful and to multiply and to fill the earth. It's impossible for homosexuals to do that. People who have chosen a perverse lifestyle, who are actively perverse, are denying the fundamental commandment to mankind. And I understand the arguments that are made that we should be tolerant, and I am not in favor of hanging homosexuals, but God specifically singles this out for particular mention. When we begin the book of Romans, one of the unpleasant parts of the beginning of the book of Romans is the description of the sins of the pagans, and this is high among them. So we're not introducing some new concept here. This is fundamental, and we're seeing God's response here. This is not a mere breach of hospitality, as the modern homosexual community would like to say. The practice itself is grossly evil, and there's no way we get around that. And so the men of the city said, "Bring them out that we may have relations." But Lot went out to them in the doorway and shut the door behind him and said, "Please, my brothers," look what he calls them, "my brothers, do not act wickedly. Now behold, I have two daughters who have not had relations with men. Please let me bring them out to you, and you do with them whatever you like. Only do nothing to these men, inasmuch as they have come under the shelter of my roof." So he's perverting his own principle of hospitality and is willing to give up his daughters. We begin to see how far Lot has fallen. Now, the question is, how low can he go? How much is he willing to lose in this process? We'll find out next week. I'm going to stop right here at verse, how far did we get? At verse 8. At verse 8, we'll quit. And next week, we're going to take another look at this and go further into this interaction between these two angels and this this rather unfortunate character, Lot. We're going to see what happens as a result of Lot's decision to separate from Abraham and go down into the cities of the plain. And we'll come back and find out what happened to make the Dead Sea dead. Anyway, let's quit that. Let's see if I can find my somewhere here. There is. Okay, let us. Okay, we're stopping the share, and I'm going to unmute everybody. Guys, thank you for putting up with me. It's always nice to see this crowd. I love you guys. Next week we'll do the fall of Sodom and Gomorrah. We'll go on a little farther than that. I want to get into chapter 20 and see how that works out because it all fits together. And then I'll skip a week. The week that Donna and I are in the Philippines, we won't have a Wednesday study. But the following week I'll be back and we'll do that. I may be a little jet lagged, but we'll be here. I want to get all the way through the Abraham story in another couple of sessions. So God bless everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye for now. Ciao ciao.
Grazie.
Ciao
Goodbye.
tutti.
Grazie.
Ciao.
Bye bye.
Bye bye everyone.
Ciao a
Ciao.
tutti.